Welcome to the War Room. It's Natalie G. Winters hosting today, Monday, May 13th, in the year of our Lord 2024. We've got a packed show for you. Don't go anywhere. We have Mike Benz, Ben Harnwell, Dave Walsh, Naomi Wolf on all things Bill Gates wanting to vaccinate cows with, of course, mRNA vaccines to defeat climate change. The latest on government censorship from the one and only Mike Benz. But we're starting off the show with the one and only Ben Harnwell, who is always sending me wonderful articles that they're always from the mainstream media, but you always sort of get the buried lead on them. There's always some interesting takes. I want to start with the interesting foreign policy piece, kind of a, I guess, expose. Europe's youth are fueling the far right. I'd love if we could start there and then walk through another Economist article that shows a big win for the War Room movement.
Morning, Natalie. Good evening, I should say. Good afternoon, good evening. So this is a story in foreign policy, which is, along with foreign affairs, is one of the two big foreign magazines that give insight. It sort of tends to dig down on issues that we're only able to touch on in the mainstream press slightly. This is a fascinating article. You know, I immediately headlined this, "The Kids Are Alt-Right." And it's basically an analysis coming up, as all of my stories are on today's show, Natalie. It's the shadow overhanging this is the European elections, which is the fundamental, most important political event in Europe in any 5-year period. And that's coming up in less than a month's time. And this is basically building on a German study which indicates how about a full 22% of young people said that they would vote the AfD, for example, in Germany. And I've got more news to come through on that, on the AfD in the show. And it's just sort of digging down further on that, illustrating the movement of the youth. And we often think of the youth as being pretty woke and brainwashed, Generation Z especially, as being woke and brainwashed. But the first cohort that might actually be able to vote here has, interestingly, really quite interestingly, a movement away from that. Another example here cited in this article, and I'll post the links. All the links will be on the Rumble, on the video clip on Rumble, is that in the Netherlands, for example, in their elections last year, that 17% of people under 35 voted for Geert Wilders' party, the Party for Freedom. So if you're interested, folks at home, in sort of digging down on the various movements towards what the mainstream media would like you to believe are far right political parties, look out for the link. I'll also have the link to that on Getter, but all the links themselves will be on the in the description box in the show notes on the Rumble channel. Moving on from that, Natalie, seeing as I mentioned the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, astonishing news came out of Germany just a few hours ago today, and this is a superior court has confirmed a lower court's judgment saying that the AfD is officially suspected of extremism. And this means that the intelligence services, the German intelligence services, can now officially monitor the AfD's activities and communications. Now, because of Germany's past, and obviously I'm talking about sort of the Third Reich there, because of Germany's past, there are what are considered to be high legal hurdles to allow the state surveillance of any political party. But in this ruling today, which the AfD have already, their lawyers have already said that they are going to appeal that. They've said that. They've said that they're going to appeal this because they thought there are some procedural problems with this decision. But the decision itself can't be overturned. Unfortunately, so that means that the German authorities will now be able to monitor and snoop on what's going on in this party. This party already, I think, in 3 regions in Germany is number 1 in the polls. So how this ruling will affect Germans in the European elections and, of course, the local elections towards the end of this year remain to be seen. But one German minister obviously grabbed hold of this news, the Interior Minister today, and she said that today, somewhat ironically, she said today's ruling shows that we are a democracy that can be defended. When, of course, having unelected judges starting to use state apparatus to tamper down on political movements that have huge popular following, but officially sanctioned political views is far, Natalie, it's very far from democratic.
I want to link the two stories together. I'm, of course, want to add in, I believe it was not too long ago, there was that German politician who got, arrested or censored for inciting hatred because she dared to publish statistics about migrant criminality. But on what is sort of precipitating the shift of young voters, which of course we're seeing here in the United States too, do you think that immigration is one of those key issues that is sort of, for lack of a better word, red pilling Europe's youth, in the sense that that is why they're trying to crack down on discussion of it, brand parties that, dare to actually talk about it extremist? Or what are some sort of the wedge issues that are precipitating the shift of younger voters?
Well, that's a great question, Natalie. And today I saw something circulating that said that 70% of Europeans don't want any more immigrants in Europe, and a general complaint that our borders remain wide open. So 70% is a huge number from whichever degree you look at it. And if you're thinking from the fact that most mainstream political parties are massively out of touch and massively terrified that the dissatisfaction in Europe is moving people away, both to what the mainstream media calls the far right, but also to the far left as well. There's a general centrifugal force on the political spectrum there, and that is definitely something to watch out for. 100%, yes, of course. But by the way, you mentioned the German. Again, it's the AfD. It's the same party. You saw you mentioned this article from last week where this politician had been slapped down. I think she's been fined for publishing the migrant statistics in Germany in relation to crime, I think it was. These are official government statistics that she'd pushed out on X. So you have to ask yourself, with all the nonsense now of how the state is trampling over every element of due process to punish politicians who have politically unfavorable points of view, how far are they going to go when it is now presumably a crime to publicly report official government statistics? How can you possibly have any kind of debate, informed debate, which is necessary for any kind of democratic participation? So I think that question, Natalie, is very well put. It's something that Europe needs to work out its answer to and do it very quickly.
Well, that's precisely the point, Ben Harnwell. If people want to stay up to date with all of your analysis, your articles, I feel like you know what is going on all things Europe. Where can people go to follow you?
On Getter, at Harnwell, which is simply my surname, at Harnwell, and that's my social media platform of choice, Natalie. I close with this, that the British Tory party today, Rishi Sunak, was also agitating on the immigration thing, umming and ahhing, saying, perhaps we're going to have to leave this European Convention of Human Rights that will allow us to send refugees back to either the safe country that they travel to or back to their country of origin. And Natalie, my point is this: I don't know if you saw the show on Saturday with Don Jr. He made a very good point, a really very good point, that globalist elites, what I call our sociopathic overlords, they use people's lack of knowledge in process in order to deny, to pretend in front of the television cameras that they want to achieve an end when they actually have the power to do something about it. And of course, that I think is what he's talking about, people's lack of knowledge, which you do need an expert sort of sense of knowledge on process to see what these people are doing. And this is your giveaway clue that when you see a government or people in power, Natalie, acting as if they are an opposition, saying, oh, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, when they actually have the power to be doing that, you realize you're in the hands of people who are fundamentally working against your interests.
Certainly, and that's why they got to censor us so much. Ben, one more time, if people want to follow you, where can they go?
At Harnwell on Getter.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ben. Have a good one.
Thanks, Natalie. You too.
And War Room Posse, like you guys saw, we teased on this morning's show. One of the news stories coming in hot on the warroom.org website has to do with, you guessed it, lawfare. Judge Merchan's daughter, of course, that she worked, or her company worked on behalf of the Biden campaign, Adam Schiff on behalf of Kamala Harris, bunch of Democratic congressmen and senators, even the one that was attacking Trump for daring to have his huge rally in New Jersey just last weekend. She said he wasn't welcome there. I think the 100,000 or so attendees would beg to differ. But to make matters even worse, some of her other clients, this consulting firm, include the Brennan Center, which you guys may know. It's a far left, of course, Soros funded to the tune of millions of dollars, sort of leftist lawfare group. That's their bread and butter. So I guess only natural, it runs in the family. But Lauren Mershon, her firm, helped them do fundraising, run digital ads concurrently, while this same group was behind the Colorado ballot removal proceedings for Trump. They actually stepped in and filed suit trying to overturn President Trump's appeal of the Colorado state courts, or rather the Supreme Court's decision to remove him from the 2024 primary ballot. They also have over a dozen ongoing, or I guess active lawsuits against either the then Trump administration or the Trump campaign, including cases that have explicitly to do with election matters, specifically the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania. They've stepped in, filed a brief to defend her against the Trump campaign, basically accusing them, rightfully so, of playing games with ballots and hiding them from people. But of course, like I said, wouldn't be a Natalie Winters scoop if there wasn't a Chinese Communist Party angle. One of the other clients of this consulting firm, of course, run by, I believe she's a president and a partner, Judge Merchan's daughter, is the Asia Society, which is one of the top dogs in the Chinese Communist Party's foreign influence operations that go on here in the United States. They mask themselves kind of euphemistically. They act like they just want to promote, cultural exchange here in the United States, and that we need to learn the story of the economic miracle of China. But of course, there's much more sinister motives going on there. They actually administer a network of Confucius Institutes. You may know these controversial hotbeds of propaganda and espionage were banned by President Trump. He really cracked down on them. But in the meantime, you saw Lauren Mershon and her firm come in and start working for the Asia Society, helping them kind of do PR, I would say. It's propaganda amidst President Trump cracking down on, like I said, Confucius Institutes and, of course, the Chinese Communist Party more broadly. A lot of parallels there with the type of business deals that Hunter Biden was getting involved with. And while we're on the topic of Hunter Biden, fun fact, Iraq has been giving out a lot of foreign licenses for oil and gas drilling agreements. China has gotten the overwhelming majority of them, going to primarily one company, CNOOC, that's the China National Offshore Oil Corporation, which is one of the Chinese energy firms that Hunter Biden and his firm BHR Partners invested in and are still believed to have a stake in. That's, of course, following all of these LNG, the natural gas deals being done in yuan, so kind of continuing that de-dollarization trend, being done under the auspices of Sinopec, which is another Chinese Communist Party owned energy company that Hunter Biden was invested in to the tune of billions of dollars. So, no conspiracies, no coincidences, but there's a lot of pattern recognition going on here in the war room. I see we have Dr. Wolf up now. Dr. Wolf, I saw this story in Axios. They, of course, didn't spin it the way that we do here in the war room, although I guess it's not spin, it's just truth. But they were excited that they were going to start vaccinating cows with, of course, mRNA vaccines to combat climate change. And while I thought that headline was ridiculous enough, the buried lead being that Bill Gates is leading the financing round for it. Can you walk us through this preposterous idea?
Sure. It's so sad. I mean, they just don't quit is the theme, right, Natalie? They just don't quit. I mean, you and I spoke last time we were together virtually about how AstraZeneca has been withdrawn from the European market. They pulled AstraZeneca. So now out of 4 major brands in the West, 2 of them, J&J and AstraZeneca, are so faulty, so defective, so murderous that they've been quietly withdrawn. So humans are resisting, so animals are up next. So Arcgib Bio, a Boston developer of a vaccine to reduce livestock methane emissions, and you know what those are. It's gaseous emissions from cows. I don't want to use the third grade term. Raised a $26.5 million VC funding round led by an investment fund founded by Bill Gates. So Axios justifies this by explaining that the burps and other gases coming out of livestock amount to 5% of global greenhouse gases. And so this VC firm posits that vaccines could be a relatively low-cost, scalable solution, particularly as food demand increases. Methane is very, very bad, says Axios about the science. More potent than carbon dioxide, though they acknowledge that it dissipates even faster. I just want to note that the premise that a vaccine can make a mammal burp and, pardon my language, and pass gas less is novel because, some humans have digestive problems and vaccines, to my knowledge, are not used to deal with that. So it seems like a scam to start out with, and I'm going to get to why that's important. Breakthrough Energy Ventures led the Series A round, and a bunch of other big ag and VC groups jumped in. And so the bottom line is that there's this push to put these vaccines in livestock with this rationale of, climate change. Now, can I go ahead and analyze why this is so bad and not at all what it purports to be? Or shall I pause?
Always. There is no censorship here in the war room. You can always go ahead.
Thank you. Well, you all know exactly where I'm going with this. It's a pretext, right? I mean, first, everyone remember that our meat supply has been targeted. For as long as these evildoers have ramped up in 2020, our meat supply, as well as just the basic infrastructure of our food supply, all these food processing plants going up in smoke. We remember the biomilk scandal, which we broke here on this show, where another Gates-backed venture was producing lab-grown formula, even as baby formula was being withheld from desperate moms and babies by the FDA, our favorite friends, the FDA. Well, this is related. Remember also, you just, Natalie, rattled off in a virtuoso riff, a number of Chinese companies or entities that are kind of stealthily taking over aspects of the United States. Smithfield, the biggest or one of the biggest pork producers, is now wholly Chinese owned, right? And Bill Gates often acts as kind of an ally or cat's paw for Chinese interests, as well as just general globalist Satanist interests, right? So where I'm going with this is they wanted the whole vaccine rollout was a pretext. COVID was a pretext to get us into a social credit score and to get a vaccine passport onto all of us. That didn't work because of the posse, basically, and about 100 other people. But as a result, they're looking for different ways to manage humans. Well, what better way to manage humans than basically put livestock into a social credit system and track them and vaccinate them? And what I mean by that, if it sounds odd, is that many freedom-loving farmers who raise cattle, who raise livestock, are saying that there's a push to get them chipped so that they can be tracked everywhere, to create a kind of internet of bodies with livestock. And that's the goal, right? The 15-minute cities, the tracking of us through our devices, the tracking of us through our vaccine passports. And so by tracking and also kind of creating injection roster really for livestock, think about what that does. It's going to be exactly what they tried to do to us in lockdown. They'll be able to say to farmers, oh, if you don't do this to your livestock, you can't bring it to market. It can't go into the food supply. We won't, you won't even be able to sell it at farmers markets. I mean, there are bills to allow farmers to just sell their meat at farmers markets because there's so much strangling by the federal government of the process of farmers getting their meat to market. So basically, by tracking and injecting all of our meat, and God knows what they're putting in it, right? Like, we only found out 2.5 years in that there was DNA fragments and things that cause turbo cancer and, murderous problems with the vaccines for humans. By creating a pretext to vaccinate with this new thing they're creating by the same guy who created the murderous thing we're all struggling with now and many people are dying from now. It's a great way to cull our herds, which is happening in Europe through other mechanisms, right? Climate change being the reason that Irish and Dutch farmers have to cull or limit their herds. And it's also a way to put pressure on farmers, basically, and on our whole food supply to comply in certain ways, or else we don't get to eat and they don't get to bring their livestock to market. That's my analysis.
Dr. Wolff, I was going through just a few articles this weekend. There was one in The Guardian saying that new superbugs are going to make COVID look like, nothing. They're going to look like child's play, that they developed a universal vaccine for coronavirus strains that we don't even know about. And I'm using the verbiage from their headlines. And there was one other one. I think that they developed another mRNA vaccine to allegedly fight brain cancer, right? All sort of shepherding us toward this sort of, I want to call it predictive programming, but this idea that there's going to be this, new virus, this new pandemic, despite I thought it was COVID-19 was, the once in 100 year, once in a century, once in 1,000 year pandemic. Now suddenly that narrative is out the window. But I'm just curious from your perspective, when you start to see these stories coming out, where do you stand on that front in terms of kind of the next pandemic coming? Is it imminent? What are your thoughts on that kind of narrative taking shape?
Well, I'm really, you and your team, Natalie, always identify the right signals in the noise, right? I mean, this is also a very, very important article that has a lot of buried red flags in it, not so buried to people like us, but this is terrifying. It's worse than the drumbeat that we're familiar with about there's going to be another pandemic. I mean, Bill Gates keeps saying there's going to be another pandemic, right? It's worse than that. This, as I read it, well, first of all, the person launching this campaign, because it's a campaign, is Professor Dame Sally Davies. So she's deep in the belly of the beast. She's deep in the medical establishment that brought you the lockdowns and the mandates. She's England's former chief medical officer. She's now the UK's special envoy on antimicrobial resistance, meaning she's a government gal. She's got a heartbreaking story about losing a goddaughter 2 years ago to an untreatable infection. Could be true, very sad. Could be, we don't know. We're not verifying it. Certainly a young woman died, it appears. What is a goddaughter? I don't know. I'm not going to question that, but it's like it's got the hallmarks of a convenient, sympathetic mission that makes you believe this woman. She's painting a bleak picture of what will happen if the world fails to tackle something that she says is more acute than climate change, just in time for people who stop believing in climate change being exactly what they said it was, to have something more acute to fear, right, from the globalists. And what she's concerned about is drug-resistant infections that kill at least 1.2 million people a year. And I'm not trying to be harsh, but 1.2 million people a year dying of a thing from around the world isn't, it's within the scale of normal things human beings deal with. It's not just like with COVID numbers. We were asked to think that these, what turned out to be pretty reasonable numbers, within like flu deaths were catastrophic. I'm just calling everyone's attention to the fact that that's not a catastrophic number of people around the whole world have billions of people to die from infections that were not treated or not treatable. So she says it could make COVID look minor. Now, widespread resistance. So you should recognize these projections. These are models, right? None of these things are happening. None of these things, we're not even shown a trend line. She's saying it could happen. Well, climate change could have happened the way they said, and now it's not happening that way. The COVID could have happened the way they said, and then it didn't happen that way. So you should be very scared.
Dr. Wolf, we're coming up against a break. I want to hold you because you're so right. The way you read the headline, they make you think that we're all going to die tomorrow from the super bug. It's the words they use. It's truly absurd. But another place that is not alarmist, they don't use words that are overblown. Just the best word, and I would say financial history of this country and frankly the world, is gold. So you got to go to birchgold.com/Bannon to get the latest installment of The End of the Dollar Empire. Maybe they will make that required reading at the Claremont Institute. It should be. Steve wrote it. It's all about central bank digital currencies, basically how the Fed is doing nothing and how gold has always been a hedge. So you got to make sure you get the latest installment. Go to birchgold.com/Bannon, and we will be right back.
All this nonsense, all this spin, they can't handle the truth.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
They can't handle the truth. That's why we got a piece popping in The Economist titled "The Liberal International Order is Slowly Coming Apart." For decades, they've put the burden of that on, of course, the American working class and, of course, the Lao Beijing in China, right? We have to basically underwrite the whole system. The Chinese workers and, frankly, American workers still have to deal with horrible conditions perpetrated by these corporations that want the wide open borders to suppress wages, probably get votes. But even The Economist is picking up that globalism is dying. I wouldn't want to be a globalist, especially when Trump gets reelected. But I had to cut Dr. Wolf off. I want to let you pick up where you left off, but I also want to link it to, I believe the news was coming out today, or we've always known this to be true, I should rephrase. The Wall Street Journal finally picked up on it, that global birth rates are plummeting, and it's a real problem. We know the U.S. hit record low birth rates under Joe Biden, 2 weeks ago? But I'm curious to really go meta, to go, bigger picture here, how this all links together from your point of view.
It does link together. Well, just to wrap up the kind of biggest headline of all with this Guardian story, Davies is part of, wait for it, the UN Global Leaders Group. So she's in the center of the cabal. And what do they want? They want antibiotics, which are lifesavers, to be government held in a subscription model. So again, you take this thing, there's a pretext of it's a catastrophe, it's a crisis, we're all going to die. And instead of making antibiotics more available, right, or letting people have the information so they can make their own best choices about when to use antibiotics, they're going to create a paywall around antibiotics, brought to you by the same people who put a paywall around life that you had to access through your injection. And that's what they're going to do to keep us under control. So both of these are the same thing, right? Centralize and control our food supply, centralize and control our antibiotics. Now you brought up the declining birth rates, which is a tragic confirmation. And the fact that the Wall Street Journal has actually run a story on it 2 years after War Room, broke the story of the reproductive damage, all of us together, that we knew we were going to see. That's part of it too, because, well, it's the big picture of a smaller population and a replaced population is easier to control. And lastly, it's funny, I just saw this before the camera started rolling, but there's also a rollout of very high quality female robots in some Asian country. I didn't notice, but the hypothetical, they're like almost indistinguishable from human women, except better, right? Because they don't talk back and they slice cucumbers better. And they have all kinds of, wonderful qualities that would make women obsolete, or at least give us a competitive disadvantage with all of our demands and needs and personalities. But these perfect robots, the hypothesis is that they are part of a push for replacing, and this is a Joe Allen question too, but replacing humans with machines and then putting reproduction behind a paywall, right? Or you need to supplicate the state to get pregnant. You need to supplicate the state to get semen, from a semen bank that isn't ruined, to get eggs from the egg bank that aren't ruined. And that's how I see more and more this destruction of human reproduction. The fact that, before 2021, we used to humans used to be able to have free semen and free eggs, and people figured out how to get them together, for as long as there's been human history, and we had babies for free. That's going to be targeted the way that free-ranging animals and readily accessible antibiotics are being targeted, and that's again to give the ultimate control to our overlords. Because if you can't have a child without the help of the state, or you can't eat without the help of the state, you're completely dependent on the state.
It all converges, and I'm sure it dovetails quite nicely with the WHO pandemic treaty, the timing of all that. Dr. Wolff, if people want to follow you, get the books, get the website, where can they go for all that?
Please go to dailyclout.io, and you can get all the reports there that the War Room Daily Clout Posse did for free. Please support us. And you can also come to my Substack, Outspoken, and I'm Naomi R. Wolf on Twitter. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Posse. We will fight.
Thank you for joining us. And War Room Posse, while you're at it, you can go to publicsquare.com to stop giving your money to these corporations who hate you and are intentionally suppressing birth rates here in the United States. They're making this country more infertile, overweight, woke, frankly, uneducated, devoid of critical thinking skills. But that's how they want it to be. It's easier for them to control you. That's why they want to import a bunch of people who, frankly, don't even speak English, because it's a lot easier to probably get them to buy into Joe Biden's Bidenomics and policies, because I don't know how you articulate that to anyone who speaks English, because not a lot of salient points there. But someone who does make a lot of salient points is, of course, Mike Benz, good friend of the show, someone who I thought we needed to have on to discuss all things censorship. Of course, reporting coming out that the White House has sort of resumed talks with big tech to re-up their election censorship efforts. But I'd love if you could just kind of give the posse an update on where we stand on that front, but even more broadly internationally.
Yeah, so domestically, the FBI and DHS, as you mentioned, have resumed their talks with social media companies. This was something that they were banned from doing from July 4th of last year through until just about 2 months ago here, when the trial court decision in Missouri v. Biden basically declared that it was against the law. It was a violation of the First Amendment for them to engage in direct censorship collusion with the tech companies. And so they were enjoined from doing that at the trial court. That was then ratified by the appellate court. But the Supreme Court, as it deliberates on the Missouri v. Biden mega free speech case, which is really the biggest free speech case maybe in American history, although before SCOTUS right now, before the Supreme Court, it's just a preliminary injunction that they're weighing on. Then there'll be a couple of years of litigation after that. But they lifted the stay. They stayed the injunction is the more precise way to say. So the FBI and DHS are taking advantage of that lull period to basically get in the intimidation and the insinuation of favors for favors with the federal government if companies like YouTube and Facebook will go ahead and censor election misinformation. Now, this is happening in tandem with with DHS having active partnerships with the state Secretary of State offices in, I think, 6 of the 7 battleground states, as well as many others, to have election misinformation monitoring centers that are plugged into DHS's 24/7 cyber mission control to be able to immediately scan and ban emerging narratives about the election that are deemed to be misinformation by DHS. So all of that hangs in the balance in terms of what the Supreme Court will decide. But it remains to be seen, what specifically DHS and FBI are saying to the social media platforms. We had a lot of great transparency on what they were saying in 2020, mostly because of inadvertent bragging by the partners of DHS, who essentially spilled the beans on the whole operation and allowed us to really get into the files and get into the videos where this was all happening. We don't yet have that transparency for 2024, and I think we're all praying that we'll have that before the election rather than after the election. And then there's the international story, but maybe I can pause there if I'm going on a bit
hit
here.
it, please.
Sure.
I love my guests.
So,
they make my job so easy. They just do it for me. I don't even have to ask them questions. So go ahead.
so on the international story, there's on the censorship side, there's a great thing that happened yesterday, which is Elon Musk, has, in addition to purchasing X and allowing so many voices back on and goring out bit by bit a lot of the censorship algorithms and censorship trust and safety filter layers, has also really taken up the legal baton on free speech, both in the U.S. and internationally. So in addition to having a free speech legal fund for people who get fired for tweets here at home, he's also worked assiduously to try to exhaust the appeals process in courts to be able to allow the posting of content that I think Twitter 1.0 management would have folded up like a lawn chair because of the controversial nature of some of the content that foreign governments want banned. So, for example, in Australia, the e-safety commissioner, and safety is just basically a kind of camouflage word for anything that's politically unsavory. The e-safety commissioner banned the distribution of a video of a stabbing of a priest by a migrant in Australia. And, the idea was this could inflame tensions. But of course, it's only that particular type of violent crime that would be censored. If there was a sort of George Floyd type event, they would want that amplified for awareness, but they don't want awareness on all issues, shall we say. So this was a viral video that was banned in the territory of Australia. And in fact, Australia tried to get the video banned from all servers around the world on X so that it couldn't even be played here in America or in Europe or anywhere. And this was something that I think under Twitter 1.0 stewardship with Vijaya Gotti and Yoel Roth and Jack Dorsey, I don't think they would have even filed an appeal to the Australian government. I think they would have just folded up and taken it. But Elon filed an appeal, and the appeals court actually just sided with Elon Musk. So now that video is back on the market, and it's an interesting example of the power of both a kind of great man of history in Elon Musk and the power of lawyers to be able to defend yourself against governments. And this is one of the reasons that obviously the Soros types are targeting Trump's lawyers here at home. Folks like Jeff Clark and Rudy Giuliani and many others. But there's a nastier story here that I think is worth maybe spending the rest of our whatever time we have left on the segment here, which is on what is at the root cause of these global government censorship laws, this cascade of them that stretch from Brazil to Europe with Brazil with the TSE court under Alexandre de Moraes, which is basically a censorship court. Then you have Europe's Digital Services Act, which is a sort of NATO censorship law. You have this new censorship law in Canada, and you have this new e-safety commission run by an American in Australia. So basically, from the far-flung corners of the globe, all everywhere, all at once, you have this emergence of almost identical censorship laws and new censorship governing bodies. And a lot of folks may be curious as to the heck of a coincidence that this is all happening in tandem. And I think I'm here today to tell you that it's not a coincidence. It all comes from a particular hub within the U.S. government that is centrally located in and around this USAID network. Now, if I can just hit the go-off juice on USAID for a second here, because
you got about a minute because we have another guest we got to get to, but okay. Tease us a little bit. I know you have this on your Twitter, but kind of give us the bullet points, and the audience, I'm sure, will be enticed.
So what USAID sits at the intersection of the Pentagon, the CIA, and the State Department. It was created in 1961 because it was getting too confusing with three different agencies, State, DOD, and CIA, running logistical aid to CIA-backed groups to advance a State Department agenda with military adjacencies. So USAID was set up as sort of an overt face of a covert funding apparatus, and it's not charity. Its purpose is U.S. soft power influence abroad. Now, in 2021, it goes back a little bit before that, but in 2021, USAID got in the business of using its soft power projection to try to get other countries to pass censorship laws to censor political groups within those regions that were threatening a State Department agenda if the wrong political party was rising to power. And what they've done is they've constructed basically a workshop series, a primer kit, and a whole set of pitch tools, and are funding groups within all these different countries to advocate and lobby for and to enact these censorship laws and censorship institutions. They call them EMBs, election management bodies, which are basically election censorship tribunals like what Brazil has and what Australia has. And so this all came from essentially the mind of a CIA pass-through.
USAID, I always say they know where all the bodies are buried, and it sounds like not just do they know where the bodies are buried, but they're helping to cover it up. Mike Benz, if people want to follow you, get the stories, support your foundation, where can they go to do all that?
Best places on X at Mike Benz Cyber, and our foundation's website's foundationforfreedomonline.com.
Epic. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Natalie.
And War Room Posse, this is an exciting day because I think for the first time I get to do a sacred human health read, which frankly of all the sponsors is probably most in line with the way I live my life. I love their grass-fed beef liver, but they also have a magnesium supplement. You guys know that they're depriving the soil here in the United States of all the critical minerals that we need, magnesium being the most important one for brain function, the way your body can do all its things, especially the nervous system. And most Americans, I think it's like upwards of 80% of people are deficient in it. I know I take magnesium. It makes me feel so much better if I have a headache, anything like that. You can tell I don't usually get this passionate about a read. You go to sacredhumanhealth.com, use promo code WARROOM, the grass-fed beef liver. They have magnesium, I think with vitamin D added to it as well. But you got to check that out. But I hear we got a cold open for the one and only Dave Walsh. So let's let that roll.
And you know, one of the best fighters in that is Congressman Van Drew. He has fought so hard. I don't know, he's around here someplace. There's nobody that fought that right over there. You'll see these things all over the place. They destroy everything. They're horrible and the most expensive energy there is. They ruin the environment. They kill the birds. They kill the whales. But are the ocean floor surveys for their construction that are causing tremendous problems with the fish and the whales and everything else? Nobody even knows what it is, but I think in 20 years, one whale washed up on shore, and then where they have these things, they come up all the time, dead. They come up ashore, he said they remind him of Chris Christie. What the hell are you doing? This can only happen in New Jersey, right, Jeff? Can only happen in New Jersey. The electricity cost, it's the highest in the country. That's what you've got. We are going to make sure that that ends on day one. I'm going to write it out in an executive order. It's going to end on day one.
We're going to end it on day one, along with some wonderful mass deportations. But to talk about the former, we got Dave Walsh joining us. Now, Dave, we only got about 2 minutes before I got to let you go. We had an unfortunately long show. But just unpack what we just watched for us, please.
President Trump has it exactly on target. The cost of offshore wind that he's speaking about is about 11 times more costly to build than basic combined cycle gas-fired technology, which is today the heart of the nation's electricity supply system. About 40% of it is that gas-fired. This stuff is 11 times more expensive to build. For example, Dominion Energy have announced one off of the East Coast by Newport News. Supposedly 2,800 megawatts of rating plate value really nets down to about 1,120 megawatts of constant power duty equivalency for $9.8 billion. That capacity, if combined cycle, would cost about $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion. But no, offshore wind of the same quantity, $9.8 billion, and the price tag's going up. They can't finance it. They're looking for partners because they can't finance it. This stuff, in addition to killing whales, is so expensive, so exorbitantly expensive, and works, again, only 42% of the time, meaning it doesn't operate 58% of the time, and you don't know when that's going to be. So it's close to useless for effective, constant power generation. He's right on target with this. Offshore wind is a huge problem for ratepayers affording affordable, reasonably priced electricity. All of the states that have done this type of thing, our top 10 highest electricity cost states, all have a far higher mix of massively expensive renewables than our 10 lowest cost electricity states. Very simple, very straightforward. This is a financial disaster.
And when it comes to this, is it an EMP event that happened recently? They've sort of spun it to achieve some political ends when it comes to strengthening the grid. Can you walk us through, again, we've got a little bit of time, your take on that?
Well, we have naturally caused EMP events about every 40 years, 50 years. There was a huge one in 1855, a big one in 1920, and a close call in 2014. This is called a coronal mass ejection from the sun of electromagnetic energy that can, if it's directed towards the Earth, is a problem. The one that just happened, we had about 11-day warning on it. It came, it went, it wasn't that bad. And this is the kind of thing the grid can be easily defended against with the surge suppressing devices, surge protection devices at the substation level, and with controls that we can move around the load when one is coming, and even shut down load in certain places when one is known to come, which isn't frequent.
And Dave, we're coming up against the end of the show. I will have you back, I promise. I feel bad. It's,
good deal.
Big Energy doesn't want you talking now. If people want to follow you real quick, where can they go to find you?
Well, I just got on X over the weekend, so on X at Dave Walsh Energy.
Talk about a buried lead.
And on Getter, of course, as usual, at Dave Walsh Energy. So trying to get the message spread far and wide, independent of who's reading.
I love that. Welcome to X. Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
and
you.
Warren Posse, one more time, you got to go to sacredhumanhealth.com to get the grass-fed beef liver or the magnesium. You can use promo code WARROOM. Like I said, I am a big fan of the magnesium, also the grass-fed beef liver. Steve and I discussed this on air. I was vetting him. I was like, is it actually grass-fed? What's the sourcing of it? I'm very particular about it. And Steve was like, the guys, they're so good. They know what they're doing. So that's why I always trust sacredhumanhealth.com. Promo code WARROOM for all things health and wellness. Warren Posse, thank you for hanging with me. Steve will be back tomorrow. Have a good one.